Hello, hello. Welcome to a midweek evening stream my time, probably early morning for the US. Joined by Boffin. Say hello. Okay, let's see how this goes. I wanted to read out a post that was actually sent to me by Karu, and I've sent it to you, Boffin, but I'll read it out here during the stream. And let me know what you think. The title is I, a female, broke up with my boyfriend because he refused to put a bowl in the sink. Now it goes, this sounds entirely irrational, and hell, maybe it is. My boyfriend and I have been together for a little over a year. We are quite different, but I think our incompatibilities were originally non-deal breakers. Recently, though, our differences have caused us to be at each other's necks frequently. Last night, my boyfriend and I were sitting in the living room of my apartment, and I had cooked us dinner earlier, and we were just binge watching a show. I began dozing off, so my boyfriend suggested we head to bed. As we were getting up, I noticed a bowl sitting on the coffee table, which we had used to share popcorn. I asked my boyfriend if he could place the bowl in the sink before coming to bed. Not wash, rinse, or place in the dishwasher, merely place it in the sink so that I could get to it tomorrow before work. He told me no, and waltzed into my bedroom, leaving me in the living room. I grabbed the bowl and placed it in the sink while calling out to him, "Very kind of you, babe, thanks." To which he replied, "Not going to disable you, you're welcome." At that point, I decided to lay on the couch in the living room instead of heading to bed. I am not entirely sure why. I guess I was just taken aback by how rude and dismissive and out of left field he had been, but I began to cry. He heard me crying and decided to turn on the television in my bedroom. At that point, I had enough of his attitude, so I went to the bedroom and said, "I think it would be better for us to spend the night apart tonight." to spend the night apart tonight. He nodded and was out of my apartment within a few minutes. As he was leaving, I said, "I am just really confused why asking for such a minor favor has led to such a major blow up." He replied, "I want a girlfriend who wipes her own butt," and then left. I was very offended and hurt by the last comment. As my boyfriend knows my upbringing, I have been very self-sufficient and independent since before adulthood. I grew up with two very abusive, oftentimes negligent and emotionally unavailable parents, and moved myself out of that environment by the age of 17. I have since went to law school. I should have been gone to law school, secured a wonderful job, and had been doing well for myself. If anything, I've been wiping my own butt long before most children my age, but I digress. I sat on that comment for the entirety of last night and today. Ultimately, I decided to have a conversation with him today, which did lead to me breaking up with him. Long story short, he was not apologetic for anything and said that he is allowed to not want to do favors for me. I understand that, but I felt as though the way he went about it was tasteless, disrespectful, and showed me an unattractive side of him. As I said, maybe this is an overreaction. What would you guys suggest? Couples therapy. What did you think? What did you make of this, Boffin? Mm-hmm. Hmm. Hmm. Well, I'm glad you said something about selective storytelling because I remember when Karus shared this with me as well. A few interesting things popped up immediately. Sure, from her side of the story, she seems like she's an angel. And one, I thought if her boyfriend actually is like this, why are you with him acting like Mother Teresa at every turn? Because she paints herself as innocent. And I'll tell you a few things that stuck out to me. Um, where was it? Last night, my boyfriend was sitting there. Here we go. I had cooked the dinner earlier. Why would you cook dinner for someone like this who's terrible, right? And they were just binge watching a show. She began dozing off, and the boyfriend suggested they went to bed. They go to bed. So he woke her up, suggested, "Hey, let's go to bed." As we were getting up, I noticed the bowl sitting on the coffee table. If you get up and you notice something, you don't just say, "Oh, can you go put this in the sink? Why can't you do it?" So I think the way it was actually said is missing from here. She's painting herself because they were both getting up. It's not as though she already went to bed and said, "Oh, by the way, babe, before you can you just pop the bowl in the sink?" And there were a few other places in here. Where is it? Yeah, yeah, yeah. She says we are quite different, but I think our incompatibilities were originally non-deal breakers. That sort of says to me that they just found each other hot, and after a year they've been getting on each other's nerves because they're not compatible. Yeah, like, but this selective kind of and where is it? She's passive aggressive later and says, "I think it would be better for us to spend the night apart." So at every turn, she's instructing him. They both get up because she cooks him dinner, right? Why would you cook someone dinner? You both doze off. You both also, like, he didn't, after you cooked him dinner, you don't mention what happened between dinner and the popcorn on the couch. So obviously you cooked dinner, and did he help you wash the dishes? Did he help you clear the table? Who knows? Yeah. Apparently, people are telling me that they can't hear you, Boffin. Um, say something.
1 2 3 1 2 3.
Okay, now we can hear you. I have no idea why you weren't coming through. Well, that was interesting, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Well, I apologize. This is my fault. Caro actually called me. Okay. Okay, can't hear Boffin. All right, now you should be able to hear him. My apologies. I had the desktop audio muted for some reason. That was completely all my fault. Yeah, we're basically talking about how selective uh, people's people's selective way that they tell the stories. I wanted to point out that she had cooked her boyfriend a meal earlier, and then they were binge watching a show. So she didn't actually talk about how she would have mentioned him at the dinner table, not helping with the dishes or not helping. Like she would have mentioned any small thing. All she decided to talk about was that the incident with a shared, not his or her bowl, a shared bowl, that as they were both getting up, she instructs him to take it to the sink. Now they're both incompatible and they're both getting up and she instructs him to take it to the sink. He goes off because he's probably tired of her. They probably don't get along as well. It's not completely her fault, but they don't get along. And then she passive aggressively does the thing by saying, "I think it would be better for us to spend the night apart or the night alone." And then you could tell his reply. I think he's had enough of it. He actually doesn't care anymore. So he seems rude by her telling of the story, but I think he's just sick of her passive aggressive controlling nature. And then at the end, she's trying to make out as though she calls him to talk about things later on, but then she admits, long story short, he was not apologetic, um, which led to me breaking up with him. So she calls him the next day. It led to her breaking up with him. So he sounds like he just doesn't care and he's tired of being instructed. And then at the end she says, maybe I'm overreacting. What's your suggestion? Couples therapy. Why would you go to couples therapy? That's my question after all of this. This is very selective storytelling. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Boffin, because as soon as I read this, I thought selective storytelling.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was my read on the guy as well, human. This is a story of a guy who's been in a relationship with a gal that she admits that there were incompatibilities as she begins to tell the story. And to me, this is a picture of a guy who's put up with all of these incompatibilities that we have no idea how this relationship has gone up to this point. And to me, this is the point where the guy says, "I just don't care anymore. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna carry the bowl to the sink. I'm to the point where I'm so disgusted with this relationship that you do whatever you have to do with the bowl." The story has nothing to do with a conflict over the bowl. In my mind, this is the the point that the relationship has led to, the end of the relationship, and the bowl is just the thing that she's pointing to. This trivial event that has nothing to do with the rest of the relationship.
I remember watching a video, I can't remember which one it was a while ago, and it was a psychologist or a therapist, I can't remember. And he says one of the most frustrating things that they experience is someone coming in for genuine help and not being honest, not being open about who said what, uh, what input you had into the situation versus them, because everyone loves to paint a story that they're an angel and the other person is a tyrant. And in these sort of stories, this this Mary Sue, this perfect little wallflower that's painting this story as though, like, look, I'm just such a nice person. I made dinner. She likes to kind of say, oh, she made dinner for the person. They were watching TV, and then she just kind of, in this sweet passive aggressive way, she's trying to kind of appear clueless. But I guarantee if you heard his side of the story, or if you had them both together, it'd be very, very different. And then she's kind of saying, am I overreacting? Well, the way you told it, you know that you shouldn't be near this guy. The fact that you're saying to complete strangers on Reddit, am I overreacting? Well, maybe you're over embellishing. That's what you really want to say. And you're
Right.
asking for our suggestion. And then at the end, couples therapy to either show that you're so nice, like you won't give up on him. Why? If he's this terrible, he sounds like the worst kind of guy. The only thing she left out of this was that he started throwing a table around, or her, because you're either stupid. I don't get it. Like, I could almost bet my house that she's embellishing this story.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I think your read on the way the relationship began is probably pretty accurate, human. There was more than likely they're both relatively young. I think she was in her mid 20s, he was in his late 20s. More than likely the relationship began because there was some physical attraction.
Mm.
And they acted on the physical attraction, and somehow over the course of the next year they never really quite made it into the whole let's talk about the relationship part of the relationship.
But it's interesting. Like, when I was relayed this story, and then when uh, Karu, his first reaction, my first reaction, I told it to my missus as well. Her first reaction, all of our first reaction is you trust the story and you say, yeah, the guy's a prick. But then something just doesn't sit right with you. And I think it's people are posting. Uh, what kind of aggravates me is that people are pretending to have genuine conversations or ask for help by not being completely honest about what's going on. If you want, if you've got a puzzle piece that you're trying to work out, but you're leaving pieces off the board, and you're desperately, seemingly genuinely asking people, like, please help me with this, but you're intentionally leaving pieces out of the puzzle, or you're not presenting yourself, and then later, what, you're going to blame your therapist? You're going to it's this fear or reluctance to put your hand up and say, okay, this was my fault, but this was the other person's fault. Now we can have an open discernment of who was right, who was wrong. And then when I look at every piece on the board, then I can make a more rational decision of what I should do.
Yeah,
It,
I agree. I think that kind of illustrates the difference between someone who is genuinely trying to solve a problem versus someone who is trying to, position themselves. I watched a clip the other night. It was a short clip of a black marriage therapist. It was a woman, and she was talking about the thing that she noticed. She did couples therapy, and she was talking about how there was a reoccurring theme, and she kept hearing that women didn't want to take responsibility, and she thought it was just kind of bitter fruit from her male clients. But as she engaged with couples in her practice, she noticed a pattern where if she directed any type of criticism or suggestions to the female partner in the relationship, there was a high there was a high likelihood that the female wouldn't show up for the next session. The guy would show up, but the females would drop out at the point where she was becoming critical of the female behavior. They tended to avoid it. And I'm not saying that guys don't do the same thing, but I think it just illustrates the point that when if you're trying to solve a problem, if you're trying to fix the relationship, you will you'll tough out those uncomfortable parts. But if you're trying to
I don't think they want to fix it, Boffin. You know the old saying, they don't want you to fix their problems. They just want you to listen, and so they want to emote. I think that they don't think they plan it. They enjoy the drama. It's why they like operas. It's why they just want a guy
yeah,
there to sit like a stone and listen to her express herself. Whereas he's thinking, here's a person I care about. She's in trouble. She's in pain. Let me help her fix the issue so we can be happy. But she would rather express emotions rather than rectify it. And if she's bitching about her work or her colleagues or what some girl did, and he just wants her to be happier, she doesn't like it. She's like, can you just listen to me? I don't need you to fix my problems. And I think it's the same thing with therapy. I think that same mechanism happens where they don't go to therapy to fix their issues. They go to therapy so a happy, new, fresh, romantic movie's played out in front of them and they can feel good, but not necessarily because they've done something. I think, guys, if we don't actually fix something, things don't get better. But with a woman, you just need to play a great story to either entertain her or make her feel better. And again, I know not all women, but I think this discrepancy you talk about is due to that.
yeah, I agree, and I think I've actually never looked up the statistics of the success rate of couples counseling, but just kind of my impression of when I have stumbled across people talking about it, I don't think they have a very high success rate, or at least that's my impression. I think
This,
if
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think if a couple sincerely wants to fix a relationship, with very few exceptions, I think they can figure it out on their own.
Mm.
I'm sure there are some circumstances where neither one of them are aware of what the aggravating problem is that's causing problems in the relationship. But I think most of the time people can figure it out.
Oh, yeah.
And you know,
If you can get into it, you can get out of it. One thing I wanted to mention, and I mean, until you finally start dating someone or you experience a better girlfriend or boyfriend or partner or whatever, you realize how essential compatibility is. Because her statement, where she says, we are quite different, but I think our incompatibilities were originally non deal breakers. I think that's BS. Your your compatibilities keep you together, and what you call incompatibilities are just kind of surface level nothing differences. Like you like this flavor ice cream, whereas she likes another. So interaction wise, there shouldn't be core value incompatibilities. But the fact that she's saying, well, initially they weren't a problem, it's because it was all surface. I guarantee whatever I hear, it's the same story. And I've had this happen to me in the past where I was really incompatible with a person. You fight over things like bowls and glasses and dishes and bullshit because you have nothing else keeping you together. You there, Boffin?
yes,
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that this thing about our initial incompatibilities were non-deal breakers, I think your incompatibilities are always deal breakers. But I think if you say that your incompatibilities weren't a problem before, I think you were hiding from what was important to you. I recall my last ex, she was a big traveler. That was her number one hobby, and she loved traveling. And no matter at the start, I said, like, I know you love traveling, but I cannot travel as much as you do. She lived for traveling. So basically, she's all her money that she saved up, she went traveling. And I said, look, I'll join you here and there when I can afford it, but I cannot invest that much time and money into traveling. And she was like, yeah, yeah, fine. And then later on, she cited, well, I didn't realize how much traveling was important to me when we started to fight more and more. And it wasn't just about traveling. But I think if you hide from the core values and your identity, what is important to you, what you like talking about, and it's not just what you like talking about, what you like relating to the other person with. It could be language, conversation, genre of movies, hobbies. So it's both verbal and physical, the stuff. Otherwise, what handshake do you have with the person if it's not lexical or if it's not physical in some way? And it can't just be the bedroom physical. It has to be some sort of handshake, mentally or structurally in your life.
I think it goes to the very question of what are the foundations of your relationship. And I think in today's world, human, what we see over and over again is we're very focused on the kind of the superficial aspects of a relationship. Obviously the sexual part of it is at the fore in today's world, but also I think it's much more. People have a much more lighthearted and casual attitude about why you're with the other person. Of course, everyone enjoys being around someone that makes you feel good. You enjoy spending time with them. You enjoy the activities that you enjoy doing together. But that really doesn't address the foundational aspect of the relationship. What are the foundations? What are you going to build this relationship on? And if it's nothing more than I enjoy hiking and she enjoys hiking, you can see how that may be a good strategy for when everything is going well, life is good, there are no serious problems. But what happens when someone gets sick? What happens when you run into financial problems? I think in today's world we're not really doing a good job at paying attention to the foundations of the relationships before they begin.
I also don't think you care about the foundation and the core if you aren't naturally compatible. And that compatibility, even before you can do that handshake and see that you do have the same kind of things that plug into each other, if you're both not considerate and polite and fair and nice, which a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are smartasses and sassy and defensive, and they don't want to talk and they want to appear tough. And the chick wants to be, a strong, independent, whatever, and the guy wants to be macho and alpha and all this crap, this cardboard cutout stuff that is not just fake, it's surface, but it also puts up this convenient veneer where you don't really have to just be your mundane self. Because if you don't show your mundane self, the person doesn't know what they're actually getting
Yeah.
6 months from now when you wake up in your pajamas. They don't know because that's the real person. Because if you look at it, I'd say the honeymoon period is you fully dressed in your best clothing, in your window dressing, and over time that stuff just falls away and you don't even know it. They start to kind of see under the surface and read between the lines and get used to your habits, your likes, your dislikes, and you can't fake you being alive and moving around life and your circadian rhythm and your sense of humor. Just these things come out. And the fact that as when I realized how garbage a lot of the pickup lines and stuff were. Sure, when you're young and naive, you don't know anything. You've got a blank piece of paper and you literally don't know what to do. You're a nervous wreck. Some of those things can kind of help you roll the ball down the hill, but you better learn to sort of say your own words and do your own thing. It's kind of like writing. When you face a blank page, sometimes the way to get yourself out of that stuck way is to just get another writer, another essay, start typing that person's essay, and after a few lines, you start to find your own rhythm, and then you go. And I see a lot of the pickup one-liners as that. When you've got absolutely nothing, if you don't know how to go up and just say hello, maybe there's a more interesting hello you know how to memorize, like 3 things, but after that, you're comfortable enough. The one-liners that break the ice. But this kind of stuff, the more I threw away, I noticed as I got older, the more stuff made sense to me. And a lot of the stuff is just glib, appears glib to people when I tell them, just be yourself. They'll laugh at me and they'll say, well, that doesn't work. And what is yourself? And I think people are trying to be a bit too much of a smart ass. They want to look for a really clever answer instead of throwing away every sophisticated thing that doesn't work, never has, and if it does, you have to walk around with a Bible, a Chad Bible under your arm, and you have to be looking at it for every response, every move, and every relationship. You approach every relationship like it's out of Sun Tzu's Art of War, where you've got to kind of survive through it. It's just really idiotic to me.
Yeah, I agree, and it's interesting you mentioned a few minutes ago you were talking about the characteristics of this woman, and she said something to the effect that she became very self-sufficient. She could take care of herself, and that's
Yeah.
something else. Yeah, that's something else that kind of stuck with me as I read through the story. You have to ask yourself the question, if she has this kind of boss babe, highly self-sufficient, I don't need no man attitude, and while it may not be consciously exhibited in the relationship with the guy, you can't help but wonder if the guy's not picking up the vibes from this chick that, she's a self-sufficient girl and she doesn't need no man. The, you know,
Yeah.
the idea of the relationship is you bond to one another. There are certain things that you have to offer and there are certain things that you expect. It's a back and forth. But, and it's kind of the same dynamic, the advice that a lot of guys give in the men's community, maintain frame. Don't take anything. If she moves outside that frame, dump her and move on to the next one. It's these absurd extremes in relationship advice that I don't know how they got started or why people think they're a good idea. But to me, intuitively, it doesn't seem like good advice.
What specifically doesn't seem like good advice to you? What part of that?
The extremes, the extremes in relationship advice. The woman who wants to maintain this high level of autonomy. I think there's something in the male nature that wants to naturally provide and protect.
Yeah, I get you. Yep. Yeah,
And
I noticed that as well through this. Go ahead, Boffin, before I give you my
no,
thoughts.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, because what you brought up about, like, I've got up on screen here where she says, I grew up in a very abusive, oftentimes neglectful, emotional, blah, blah, blah. What, again, who cares? Like, you can't pluck out stuff from the past to excuse you. A lot of what she says is littered with her avoiding stuff. Again, I'm not saying he might, all we're hearing is her angelic side of the story. Unavailable parents, moved myself out at 17, through law school. and she can't even put a sentence structure together. I have since went to law school. You're not going to be a great lawyer, sweetheart, if you can't deliver a sentence in a court of law. Secured a wonderful job, blah, 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 doing well. This whole independence thing, rather than, it sounds like the angle she's coming at is, I'm self-sufficient, I'm asking a person to do this, do that, rather than, it doesn't sound like someone who cares about another person. You know, you see
Right.
a bowl that's empty, and if you're both getting it up, you might ask, oh, can you help me? If you asked him to help you, he probably would. But if you're saying, can you put it in the sink while you're both going to the bedroom, and he's actually probably saying like, well, why don't you do it? You noticed it. Why do you need me to do it? We're both getting up. So again, were her hands full? If her hands were full and she asked him, I understand it, but that's not what happened. Otherwise she would have said that to make him look even worse. So basically they both got up. He suggested they go to bed. He kind of woke her up to say, babe, let's go to bed. They're both getting up. And as they're both getting up, she's saying, take the bowl that we both ate from to the sink. So this whole thing is like, I'm independent. Everything he's said about me that I've conveyed to you is BS because I'm an independent, strong person that can take care of myself. I can wipe my own butt. He said I can't, but I can. Well, it doesn't seem that way. You've got a high profile job, lawyer, do well for yourself. You've moved out of home. You've got a wonderful job. You got all this stuff, but you've got a problem with putting a bowl in the sink. Again, if it was, this kind of fake testimony kind of rubs me the wrong way. Look, I could be completely wrong, but I have, not to say that I've heard a lot of fake stories, but I think the way I speak, and especially with you guys that I talk with, you give me these stories, and I like to read between the lines. I want to ask questions. I want to get the whole picture. And I feel like when someone's given me their perfect side of the story where they're angels and the other person's completely crap, the more I ask questions and delve into it, because I have sympathy. Like if someone delivers me a story where they've been really hard done by, it's like, tell me the whole story. I want to know every stitch of fabric in this story. But then after a while, when they tell you, you realize, yeah, you're not completely innocent here, buddy.
Right. Yeah, that's typically what happens when you when you get into a conversation with someone and they're talking about relationship problems, really in any type of problem that they're having, any type of conflict. It's an old saying, but there really are two sides to every story. And whether it's a business conflict, whether it's a conflict with a family member, relationships, there are indeed two sides to every story. And the point that I made earlier, I think probably when I was muted, was that um, people, it's human nature not to say bad things about yourself. You always try to paint yourself in the best positive light when you're representing yourself to someone else. And I think that's why listening to these relationship stories, and if you're trying to help someone with a problem they're having, I think you always have to keep in mind that you're getting one side of the story, and people aren't inclined to say bad things about themselves. You have to really, you're forced to read between the lines.
Yeah. And especially if it's a post, people will convey themselves and conveniently omit certain other things that
Right.
would
Right.
sort of, for me, dating just became more and more liberating for me personally, the more I was honest with my part of it. Privately, when I used to kind of write things down, because I used to kind of journal a lot of my thoughts during uh, the relationships, especially when I couldn't talk to her. I had to talk to someone. And I've got a few people in my life, but sometimes not as deeply as, say, this. This was before I started my channel. And I've got journals full of me having a conversation with the only person who could go as deep with the onion as I wanted to, and that was a piece of paper. And I started to notice when I was getting, when I started to get really honest about, like, yeah, I screwed up here. I don't want to do this anymore. It's really liberating when you don't just point fingers at the repetitive bad people out there and the bad people that you conveniently pick. Oh, but you're a victim, so you can't do any wrong. You're just bouncing around. You're getting partners thrown at you, and you can't say no. You can't be a bad person. You have to, again, be Mother Teresa and excuse a boyfriend like this who seems like, what redeeming qualities does this guy have? This story almost serves to just paint her as a wonderful person. This reminds me of, those girls that go on dates and you ask them about their exes and they give you these kind of stories. Well, he
Yeah.
was this, he
Yep.
was terrible, it was that. Why do I keep going out with these guys? And your reaction is like, well, they sound terrible. I'm normal. In fact, in contrast, I'm wonderful. And you feel great. And you feel like, not that you can save this chick, but I'm good, because the guy she talks about sound like complete dogs, and she sounds responsive and she's great. Oh yeah, I don't like guys like that. But I started to see that she either does like bad boys, or B, she's probably lying and she's embellishing the stories to make them seem bad, to make herself seem like a wonderful, nice girl by contrast. And you're just lucky enough to have found her in between bad boys, and you can have a happy life and take her away from all these terrible guys. But the fact is, they're not telling you the true story. They probably gave as good as they got, or maybe the guy was, if you were a fly on the wall, she might have been the bad guy, but she's just giving you a really nice story.
Yeah, I think that's one of the corrosive aspects of a lot of the advice passed around in the men's community today, human. I think men are developing a broad brush, but I think men are developing the same bad habit of um, trying to paint themselves as the victim when relationships don't work.
Mm.
And look, we both know the state of relationships in today's world. But I think the moment that you put on the cloak of victimhood, it removes any responsibility to try to come up with a realistic solution. And I think it actually compounds, because once you develop that victimhood mentality, it tends to repeat. It's a comfortable place to be when nothing is ever your fault. You tend to return to that mindset. So it's always the woman's fault. The woman is always doing something bad, and obviously it's. I think the dynamic has been in place a lot longer for women. That they're always the victim. They're victims of this guy, and I think guys are developing a similar mentality now. They're always the victim of the woman. And the reality is that, in a relationship, when there's two people, there's, you know, I'm not suggesting that one person may not be at greater fault than the other, but it's two people. So there's culpability on both sides.
Look, I think both guys and girls, because of their nature and their biology, they both, right off the starting blocks, they have their own problems to contend with. But if you can ameliorate those problems and work on them and get past them, you'll be able to have more success and maybe kind of find, if you pay attention, for instance, the simple concept of values-based compatibility, right? It sounds boring, right? It doesn't sound sexy. It doesn't sort of get you excited. It doesn't get the hormones going. It's nothing you think about in the, which you should be, but it's not what gets you fired up to go on the first date typically. But it's really all that matters. Say, for instance, guys are hormonally led, right? That's their challenge, to pause that, like a
Right.
excited dog, cage it,
Right.
and lower the volume on that, so if anything, put the earplugs in and to this sort of animal side of you as a guy and go there soberly and not like intentionally not willing to cross that line or go into that area unless the person's compatible with you in a way that you don't just want the bedroom, you want more than that, because you've got to go out to dinner and you got to be with them. And, if you want them to meet your family and friends and not be embarrassed about that. And if you do want companionship, that stuff is going to be there. But if you don't care, and so the women have their own struggles where they're used to other women shaming them. And so women grow up from the schoolyard avoiding, gaslighting, playing games, saying yes when they mean no. They do and say anything. They don't want to fix problems. They want to emote to either crucify another girl or to make themselves feel better by avoiding response. Like it's all a game of feel good, feel good, feel good. So there's very little directness both in men and women to get what they want. But you have to recognize what is the biggest barrier that keeps kicking you in the face every time, whether you're a
Yeah.
guy or a girl, whether it's
Yep.
your own personal problem, like you might have a temper or something. It might be your particular thing, but what is the thing that every guy has the same problem with? What is the thing that every girl, if you're a female, has the same problem with when you talk with yourselves? Not when you boost your ego and say, "Oh, I'm just wonderful." These men, or the guys say, "Oh, these women, they're all the same." It's kind of like you're avoiding the solution. The solution for men, as far as it's become, is just avoid avoid compatibility, avoid asking questions or talking. It's as though both men and women now, the rule book is I show up and it works out or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, it's their fault. And it just seems silly.
Yeah, two points. 99.95% of the time you're in a relationship with a person, you're not having sex with them. So it should be obvious that if you're leading with sex and sex is the predominant decision making uh, 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 metric that you're using in the relationship, you're going to run into trouble. And I think the honeymoon period, whether it's a year or 2 years, if that is the foundation that you're using for the relationship, you've got a year or two of the relationship. And I think this story was, they've been dating for a year. The second point is that I think one of the sad things in today's world in terms of relationships is that we've actually created a competitive environment.
Mm,
I think most people now, especially younger people in today's world, I think they bring this a big degree of uh, competition into a relationship. I think we've kind of lost sight collectively of the fact that the idea of a relationship is to build compatibility, to build the sense of a team. And instead we're really kind of competing.
mm.
I think it started with the whole feminist movement. I think we've really conditioned women to the idea that they have to compete with men, and that has kind of spilled into the realm of relationships. I don't know. It may have actually started in the realm of relationships, but certainly professionally, we teach women that they have to be competitive with men.
No,
And
I think what you suggested earlier, I've always believed that it started politically. It started with things like feminism and these outlier women, uh, whether they were annoyed at their particular little world or
yes,
they
yep,
wanted to influence others, because their slogan is the political is personal and the personal is political, where
yep.
there was always a separation. There was a separation in church and state, but now everything means everything. So it's not just that it spilled out. They wanted it to mean like they want power and control. Nowhere in this little diatribe of the chick talking about how she broke up with her boyfriend. None of it. There's no language of I like them and she likes me. Even his
Yeah.
response seems like a guy who doesn't like the person he's with. And everything she talks about is that, yeah, I don't even know why she wants to be with him, but she doesn't sound like she likes him. Like, even to sort of take the bowl, like
Yeah.
she doesn't, the language wasn't nice. It's like they're ordering each other around. Like you said, it's very competitive. And there's this kind of distance relationship that people like to have. And something you talked about before about sex only occupying like, 0.1% of the time you spend with a person if you're in a relationship. I think that we've pushed each other so far apart. Men and women are so against each other. And the axiom has become that, yeah, relationships are competitive. Or even, my ex said this, my last serious relationship, she says, a couple is supposed to challenge each other. They expect it to be challenging and filled with drama,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the business world. Like even at work, whenever you hear people say, "Oh, you're supposed to love a challenge." Like I don't want stress. And I think the political world, the business world, the job world, the money making, self-sufficient power, I'm the best kind of world has bled into this. And you see it in the way they speak. They paint themselves as the perfect boyfriend or girlfriend, and the other person is just an idiot that is rude or mean. One, why are you with them if you're so wonderful and intelligent? You kind of sound dumb choosing this person. This person's obviously rude, or you're probably lying as well. But the whole letter, it doesn't actually sound like someone who cares about the other person. He certainly doesn't seem like he cares about her, given her language. And none of the whole letter is basically her painting herself as a really nice person and she's a victim. And everyone here on Reddit, please tell me that I'm wonderful because I've chosen my words carefully in this post. And she even starts it off. This sounds entirely irrational. And hell, maybe it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that she leads with she recognizes that there are incompatibilities. Well, that right there it suggests to me that anytime you start talking about incompatibilities, it implies that you're tolerating these incompatibilities. So the way she starts the story is basically, to translate it a little bit, is I'm in a relationship with a guy and I'm really tolerating him. And it hasn't reached the point where he's become so intolerable that the relationship has ended. That's kind of the
Mm.
first few sentences of her story.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so sick of this. Again, it's not my relationship. I just feel sorry for them when I hear girls rolling their eyes about there's this chick at work. All she does is roll her eyes at how dumb her husband is, how her daughter irritates her, how she's never got time for anything. Just all these people in her intimate life are just so stupid. And why can't they do the right thing? Everyone is Ray Barone. Everyone's Homer Simpson. And I
Yeah.
think, one, just shut up, you know? Like you don't realize how dumb you sound by calling everyone you've chosen or given birth to. You're hating on every person you've either given birth to or you've chosen or you wedded yourself. Like your decision making is terrible, but you're lauding yourself off as like perfect. Like you're not. You're stupid. If you were, I wouldn't hire you given your bad decision making and your inability to rectify. You can't even, like, if your daughter's annoying you, you're a terrible mum that can't even control her daughter. Like she's a selfish woman. All she talks about is what she wants and holidays she wants to go on. But yeah, this whole victimhood, I'm the best. People around me, I'm tired of dating people who don't realize how wonderful I am. It's
Yeah.
like, God.
Yeah, exactly. The impression they try to present out to the universe is that I'm a good person because I tolerate all of you idiots.
Yeah,
That's really what it boils down to in my mind.
and it's kind of funny if you ask a guy one on one, like if you talk, even a bunch of guys, you say, take sex off the table, right? Why do you think you're a great guy? What do you think you would why are you fun to be around as a guy? What would your ex say are some of your great qualities? And so a lot of times you'll get guys actually giving you things that are unique about them, what's good about them that any woman would say, yeah, that's actually a really good quality. I'd like a guy who has that. But you ask a girl to take sex off the table and say, what's a good quality with you? And even with me, I say, like, even take cooking off the table or cleaning, like just housework, sex, take it off the table. Tell me what's great about you. What would your boyfriend say they miss about you? And most of them can't name a thing that's got to do with the person they are, how they're able to treat a person based on their character and the values by which they operate from. Hardly any of them. They scratch their heads. And that to me says, yeah, you're empty. You got nothing to offer. You're a one-way street that crosses their arms, expecting a relationship to be fed to you, and nothing comes back to you the other way to the person that's feeding you. And yeah, no wonder you break up, because no one can keep feeding a one-way street for very long.
Yeah, in my mind, it goes back to the idea that I think we've collectively we've introduced this idea of competition into relationships as opposed to cooperation. And I don't really personally, I don't understand how that works. How can you build a successful relationship when both people have the attitude that they're, simultaneously victimized and in competition? It just seems like a real toxic mix of attitudes. You and I have talked in the past, human, and I think we're both old enough to remember, our grandparents and um, great grandparents' generation. And my impression was, and I'm not trying to paint some utopian vision of how relationships used to be, because I think relationships have always been um, they've always been challenging for both men and women. But the impression that stuck in my mind was that the older generations that I remember actually had a much healthier attitude towards the opposite sex. There was an appreciation for men, and there was an appreciation for women from the other gender.
Mm.
There wasn't this toxic attitude of, he's an idiot or she's an idiot or I have to outdo the other. I think there really was a genuine attitude and desire for the opposite sex. There was I think there wasn't that inbuilt hostility from the outset when the relationship, in the relationship. Now, in many cases, obviously, hostilities developed over the course of time, but it seems to me that right out of the box today, we have this attitude of conflict that's so prevalent in relationships.
Yeah, one thing for me was, the more you talk about people prior to the current generations, right? Uh, you realize one thing that made it easier to date than it does today is that, and I remember when I was younger, and there was less and less of it as I got older, was that guys and girls actually wanted to be with each other.
Yes.
They would
Yes.
look forward to, they would want to be nice. They would want to smile. They would want to be polite.
Yes.
They would want to be direct and open and honest and show who they are and have those, informal sort of, armor down conversations. Now it's the same. I get the feeling like, I'm just gauging from the way, look at women's entertainment. They love watching the Kardashians. They love watching shows where, housewives rip each other apart. They just love watching hostile drama, and that's what they love. And I think they go into relationships with guys looking at them with the same eyes as they do when they watch car wreck housewife shows, like wanting to watch bitches and arseholes betray each other, not trusting. So their whole head, in terms of relationships, is filled up with mistrust, lying, drama, just all that bullshit. And
Yes.
so if you
Yes.
go into it calibrated by that kind of media, calibrated by those conversations, calibrated by watching the most antagonistic and provocative YouTube channels related to relationships, where they've got podcasts, there's people around a table and they're talking about how bad the other person is, and the fighting between men and women. If you're calibrated by negativity and mistrust, and you're not even looking forward to wanting the other person, liking them, um, wanting to have a good time, but instead you're going there wanting to or expecting drama, hatred, and a battle and competition, and I'm better than you, and impress me because I'm the king or I'm the queen. Like, it's a very different attitude. And I remember when I was younger, it wasn't like that, and it just grew and grew and grew as I started dating. And now all I hear is just this one-sided, competitive, drama-filled reality TV style of dating, where I really don't know why the hell you would even, what would motivate you to even go out and date. I understand why a lot of guys say, like, we don't want to date. Yeah, rationally, like, what's the point? You got to want to go out on a date with a person, especially if you sort of say, now, I don't want to just rotate for sex. I want a companion. If you want a companion, there's almost nothing to motivate you going out. Whereas before, most girls, society, and their parents would have taught them to be decent human beings, like children. Be nice, or the other kids won't play with you. So it's similar to girls, like, be nice, or guys won't want to go out with you. But apparently that lesson's not being taught.
Well, I agree. And I had a similar experience when I was young. There was a sense of congeniality between the sexes. There wasn't, there were obviously uh, uh, experiences between individuals. You may be rejected by a particular girl that you approached, but there wasn't a sense that all girls were hostile towards you. And and I think
But I
that's
think
really
they want to impress you now. I think they want to impress you by how self-sufficient they are. I mean, there was one date a couple of years ago. Right from the start, we didn't get along, and she was just. It was just like oil and water that didn't mix. But there was just a lot of, lowercase feminist kind of language in there. And I remember I was just waiting to get out of there because we just couldn't keep a conversation going. What I found funny, she didn't. What she wanted to talk about, I was tolerating, and vice versa, probably. And I remember when we walked out, I was just trying to be decent and end the night well, and sort of say, "Oh, where you parked?" And she said, "Oh, just across the road over there." And my car was on the way, but over to the right. And I said, "I'll walk you to your car," because I was just going to kind of extend and then go to my car. And she says, "I don't need a man to walk me to my car, thanks." And then I thought, okay, thank you, F you, I'm going, bye. And it's this kind of, let me impress you by how much I don't need you. It's the same in
yeah,
the guys pickup thing. It's this dishonest game playing 5-year-old that puts on a
yeah,
superhero
yeah,
costume to kind of stand there with his fists on his hips, saying, like, look how much of a man I am. Or a woman's got her own superheroine, which probably looks like Beyonce, trying to be all powerful and fierce. And it's like, you come off as a weird, angry, aggressive idiot that's complaining that no one wants you. And there's a reason no one does. You're that 5-year-old that no one wants to play with.
yeah, yep. Yeah, that's really what it is. It's It's unfortunate, but I think it's kind of the reality of today's environment. We've created this very adolescent game playing environment when it comes to dating and relationships, and and we see the consequences. To me, human, none of this is very mysterious. It it,
Mm,
it's obvious why all of these problems have become so prevalent in today's world, in the world of relationships and dating, male female relationships. They should be obvious if you're paying attention to what's going on, and have the slightest appreciation for what people really desire, what brings happiness and contentment. The problems, I think, are pretty obvious. The real stumbling block is obviously the solutions. How do you begin to address these problems and solve them?
well, I just think it's if you meet a person and you can tell their guard is up or they're showing up in a figurative suit, trying to impress you or putting on a show, and they're trying to give you slick answers. I think the more aware of the more seriously you take this stuff in terms of wanting to be real, and not so much seriously as though you've got to be like a PhD professor in relationships, but you want to put down all the pretense, let go of so much fear, and just be okay with being yourself and be
Yeah,
polite, but just be yourself. And then you start to notice someone else who's not being polite, who's not being themselves, who comes to the conversation with the guard up. I've said this before where you're more because the reason why I like talking to you and a couple of a few other select guys, when we drill down into these topics, when we're trying to figure out where we screwed up, we can raise our hand and say, yeah, I was an idiot. I used to do this.
yeah,
I don't do this anymore.
yeah,
I noticed
yeah,
this before, or I went out with this type of chick, but I never did again. I learnt my lesson. We kind of modify and try and better ourselves. Not to say that we're perfect or we never faltered. We'll say where we went wrong and where we don't want to go wrong anymore. But you talk to people our age and they're still perfect. And they're saying, well, it's the world's problem. All the women and men out there are idiots. And I feel like saying, look, I, I feel like I know I can't talk to you. You're in your own silo of perfection. I feel like just saying, yep, you're right. All women are the same. Yeah, just go off in your cabin and don't bother with women. Because I know I can't get them to be reasonable.
yeah. And I think it goes to the point that you make repeatedly in your videos and your live streams. It really is up to you to focus on what you want, what you need out of a relationship, and then go after it, and be uh to be uh what's the word I'm looking for? You have to stick to those principles. You have to get those questions answered that you need answered to make an evaluation if this person is right for you. It's up to you. You can't rely on the general goodwill of the public at large anymore. It really is incumbent on the individual to figure out what you want, what you need, and then pursue that as
Mm.
you interact with women.
Well, that's a good thing that any guy should and any girl should keep in mind, but especially for guys, because most dating, if the guy doesn't speak and take the first step and ask her out and try to not so much impress, but show who he is, a girl can get into a relationship by being completely passive and just
Yeah.
nodding her head and not doing anything.
Yep.
But I think what you mentioned is if you have to focus on one element, just focus on when you go out there, be very open, curious, and ask questions and pay attention to when those questions aren't answered, especially if you're asking reasonable ones. If you're not asking for details about what happened in a past relationship that was traumatic, but you're just asking generally, well, what did you learn, or what didn't you like with your last relationship, or what are you looking for? and you just keep getting pushback and saying, like, I don't want to talk about that. This sounds like an interrogation. Can't we just have fun? And the person is avoiding any introspective questions that would help you really get under their skin. Because if you're genuine, I noticed that I wanted those questions asked of me, but if they weren't being asked of me, I would generate them and ask them of her, of us, of her idea of it. It might not even be tell me your personal story. Let me just ask you a theoretical question so you can give me your values,
Right.
you know? So sort of like, what do you think about this and men and women? And if a guy said this or he said this, what would your reaction be? You know, it doesn't even need to be tell me your dirty secrets. It's ask questions that will kind of reveal who the person is relationship wise,
Right.
and pay attention to when you get pushback and saying, well, this sounds like an interview, or I don't want to talk about that, or you're very curious, like you think too much. All of this uh, cognitive pushback, and all they want to do is let's go traveling, let's order another this, and let's go here, and let's get naked. And it's like, hang on, I want to find out who I'm with. And if I keep getting pushback, then that's not a good sign.
Exactly. And to tie it into the bull story, um, again, at the very beginning of the telling of her tale, she points out that there were incompatibilities. And it really begs the question, well, if you recognize that there were incompatibilities at the beginning of this relationship, how much time and effort did you dedicate to talking about those incompatibilities? Or did you just gloss them over and go on with the relationship? Because the incompatibilities are always going to be there. And she
Mm.
didn't think they were deal breakers. Well, my question would be, well, how much time did you spend talking about them and working through them to make sure that they weren't deal breakers? Or did you just assume that I like this guy, he makes me feel good, he's good looking, he's got a nice car, and I'm just going to gloss over those incompatibilities?
Yeah. I think when she says we are quite different, she's already saying that they're incompatible. If you are very different from each other, you're not compatible.
That
You-
that
You're not.
that's the meaning to me.
Yeah. And then she says, but I think our incompatibilities were originally non deal breakers. So it's not to say that she's not saying, I think she didn't phrase it as our incompatibilities weren't originally non deal breakers. She's saying that our incompatibilities didn't surface because we didn't communicate, connect, we didn't
Right,
talk.
right,
If you are very different, you aren't compatible.
right.
You
Exactly.
have little quirks that are different, like, you know, one likes chocolate, one likes vanilla, one person likes this movies and that, but your compatibilities are your values and your inner world, how you respond to life, and largely your morals. But this whole opposites attract bullshit, there's just so much I'm an angel in this letter to Reddit. And look, I take a lot of the Reddit stuff, if not most of it, with a grain of salt, but I think a lot of this is instructional, where, see, even the way we're talking, you can imagine us, the way we were dating as we got older and older. We wanted to make sure, and I know for myself, I got tired of dating because I was operating to be more and more certain of the person I was with as much as I can, and you can only do it through a conversation. And
Yep.
if the person's always avoiding being compatible, avoiding talking, if you're quite different, and it sounds like here they don't talk, because if you talked, he's not going to say, well, you're not disabled. And you're not going to gaslight and say, well, I think we should not spend the night together. You're not talking about what just happened. You're avoiding what just happened. She even says it. She said to him, I think we should sleep separately tonight. So you didn't actually just talk about what happened. You passive aggressively sidestepped what just happened, spent the night alone. Then the next day you call him and then you break up. And then afterwards you ask people on Reddit whether or not you should go to couples counseling. Why? Because a therapist can communicate better than the two of you. A
Exactly.
therapist is going to put their hand up both of your asses and like treat you like puppets that talk to each other.
Exactly.
I don't
Exactly.
know. Like, I don't think, look, people could listen to me talking passionately and think I'd probably be intimidating to women, and probably I was. But I think the way I speak, I think scared a lot of women off because I knew I would always be scratching the surface of something that didn't make sense and I need to find out what was going on. I was hiding my head in the sand less and less and less as I dated, as I got older and older and older, because, and then I started enjoying dating more and more and more. But that burying your head in the sand, not talking about anything, believing that opposites attract, believing that men and women are so different that we have nothing in common to talk about, believing in those things, and then just keep continually going around in circles and believing, well, this is just a numbers game. And eventually I'll luck out and I'll meet a partner that will be like winning the lottery and we'll just be together without any effort at all. And we won't even need to talk. I think it's all bullshit.
Yeah, there's a certain irony to all of this as well, because I think the people who really are interested in compatibility in their relationships, as you mentioned earlier, as time goes on and you have more and more experience with dating and interacting with people, you kind of hone your selection criteria. You become aware of what's important to you, things to avoid in the other person. And the irony is that people who are not very critical in their mate selection find it very easy to get into a relationship. And then you know, they're the ones that generate all of these Reddit posts after the relationship becomes difficult. But the people who are actually actively, carefully mate selecting are the ones who I think find it more difficult to get into relationships, simply because they're more critical in their selection criteria. They're more careful. They're selective. So they're not going to easily step into a relationship.
I
It,
don't think most people really soberly, in terms of like cold water on your face, really accept and even want to live with the thing, the person, want to have that life with the person,
yeah, I
right?
agree.
Want to have the, I think everyone is renting sports cars, never having to change the oil, the tires, just renting it,
Yep.
thrashing it, and then just getting something else. But never saying like, now I'm gonna really, the car I get, I want to take it home. I want to change the oil. I'm going to polish it. I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to have pride enjoying this car, and this car's going to give back to me. There's none of this kind of ownership, taking care of that one thing and making a choice. It's just,
Exactly.
I'm just test driving Ferraris and sports cars, and I give them back. I've never opened a hood in my life. I don't know where the carburetor is. I don't know what an engine is. I've never changed the tire. When it doesn't work, I just kind of trade in. I get another car. And I think people's approach to dating is analogous to that example I gave with cars. And if you're boasting about rotating different sports cars and having thrills and stuff, fair enough, but stop longing for and blaming that you're not getting the experience of something that myself or our grandparents wanted, where we wanted to finally, yeah, you can have your fun choosing and experimenting and stuff. When I research cameras, I research them for a long period of time, and it's fun. But then there's nothing like making the final choice because you're certain, you know who you are, what you want, why this camera is good for you, how you're going to use it, and then get to making YouTube videos or taking photos or something, instead of just like blindly like grabbing this camera and that and handing it back at the end of the day. And it's just a sporadic life. It just reminds me of the feed that people have on their mobile phones, that they're just scrolling, on Instagram, just vertically, and that's all their dating life is. They don't sit with anything.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's a pretty good read on the situation. I think there's another dynamic that you never really hear talked about in the men's community or in the relationship community in general. But I think also you have to take into account that um, there's a percentage of the people, and I'm going to guess, just for the sake of making a point, there's roughly 50% of the people who I think are naturally natured to operate well in a relationship. It may not be an optimal relationship, but it's good enough. And once they find their way into the relationship, they'll stay in the relationship. And to represent that segment of people in the population, I'll point to the divorce rate. You know, Approximately 50% of the marriages fail, first marriages, which means that 50% of the marriages survive.
Mm,
So I think there's a group of people who are naturally inclined to be in a relationship, whether it's agreeableness, whether it's neediness. I have no idea of what those particular personality traits are, but
mm,
we can indeed prove that 50% of the people stay in that initial relationship. It's the other 50% of the people, and the interesting thing, if you think about what we've been talking about, the interesting thing is there's some percentage of them that are not in relationships or can't stay in a relationship because they don't do a good job of evaluating partners. And then there's another portion of that population who find it difficult to get into relationships, I think because they are doing their due diligence. They're actually evaluating the person that they're sitting across from. And I think your example of a lot of people who have trouble in relationships, they're renters. They want to rent the car, they don't want to maintain the car.
mm.
So
Yeah, your intent is a very big thing. Like a lot of
yes,
people
yes,
say, "Well, I'd love for it to work out." It's like, no, you don't. You don't hope for it to work out. You go there with the intent that you're going to be
exactly.
very direct, and you want it to be something, and your attitude is that you want it, and you want it to be solid and permanent, and you're gonna be completely open because you want this thing to be real. But if you're evasive and yes means no, and you don't answer questions, you're the way you're conducting yourself is telling them, and it should be telling you, that you don't take it seriously. If you take it seriously, you'll be direct and you'll be open and clear. But if you expect those results, but you're evasive and indirect, then
Right,
sorry, you're lying to yourself and the other person, but
right,
you're virtue signaling to everyone else and saying, why do I always get these guys or girls? It's because
right,
your intent is the opposite of what you're trying to get.
right. Yep. I think that's what it boils down to. And
Yeah.
then they'll go on Reddit and they'll tell these stories and try to feign victimhood and can someone please help me? I've been victimized again and I'm really a good person. What do I need to do? I think that's a lot of what we see in a lot of these internet conversations, human.
Mm. Well, I think if anything, these kind of Reddit posts, which again I take with a grain of salt, mostly because you don't know which ones are just kind of made up from whole cloth,
Yeah.
or where
Yep.
most likely people are making themselves to be an angel when they're really not. They're not be sort of laying out the fair friction that's gone on between you and your partner. I think what these things can do, these Reddit posts and online, these kind of discussions, is if someone gives you a story, delve into it, and like on a date, when the chick across from you is painting her ex to be a complete monster, and you're left scratching your head how this angel sitting across from you could have possibly ever been with this asshole for 1 or 2 years, it should really teach you to ask questions, to keep finding out what happened. And, something doesn't make sense here. and to keep asking questions and not accept pushback from the girl. Because I'm guessing someone like this could very likely keep pushing back if you're on a date with this chick and she was giving you this story about how terrible her ex is. I would be asking her questions like, so, during the dinner that you made for him, like there was no problems. Like, how come he didn't act this way about a bowl or a plate or anything? Did he help in dinner? Did he clear the table? Did he whatever? I would want to know everything. I would want to uncover all the areas. And when you both got up, what were you both getting up? Was he in front of you? And then you ask him to come back and put the bowl in the sink, or were you ahead of him? If you noticed the bowl that you wanted in the sink, why didn't you just grab it? Were your hands full? I would ask everything to get a better picture. And these kind of posts, I think, would get guys not to be very, not to say nihilistic, be skeptical, to be able to have conversations of asking questions to find out what the person's really like. Don't buy the brochure, ask questions. And if I could, repeating what I said earlier, if I could give a guy one mode to conduct themselves is on dates, be very curious and open about the personal. Ask questions about what they think of men and women and guys, and what do you like and what don't you? What are you tired of? What have you learnt? How long was your last relationship? What have you learned from that? Just kind of really, these really interesting, non-intrusive yet personal questions where you can really find out. And if you keep getting pushback of, I don't want to talk about it, I'm perfect, but they can give you a lot of detail about the story of how their exes were bad. But the moment you ask for detail about them, they don't want to tell you. That should be a red flag.
Yeah, I think the lesson to me is the packaging is not the product, and it's incumbent on you to get past the packaging, open it up, delve into the product, and if you don't understand what you're looking at, you probably don't need to be buying that product.
I just wanted to, Prince Revolver actually in the stream, and if you're here during the stream here live, make sure you add a couple of smiley faces before your comment or question to me or Boffin if you'd like to ask us something. But he mentioned something touching on what you mentioned before, Boffin. He said the older generation didn't have the programming of not needing men or women. I think this is very true. You go
Yeah,
in there expecting the person who's agreed to go on a date with you, you're optimistic that they want to, that there's no pushback, that there's no parry and thrust of competition or anything. You trust that you don't dislike each other. There's already like a low level of trust and enjoyment or
right.
wanting to go on the date. But now it's kind of like, I wonder what I'm going to get. There are no rules. Most chicks out there and most guys out there are a question mark or a warning sign. So you almost go out on dates in survival mode all the time
Yeah.
instead of going on dates in an optimistic fun mode, like you're going to an amusement park or something.
Yeah, I agree, and we've touched on it several times in these conversations, and I agree wholeheartedly. There used to be a sense of getting together with the opposite sex was something desirable, enjoyable from the outset. The expectation was that both people are interested in getting together, engaging, and having a good time. There was the presumption that this was going to be a positive experience, at least at the outset. And I think that dynamic is completely flipped in today's world.
Yeah, you're not going to meet a compatible person every time. It's not easy to find someone compatible,
Right.
but it's
Right.
kind of very easy to recognize someone who's actually not even there with a good attitude, to kind of want to just have an enjoyable time with the person. By the time I agreed to go on a date with the person, there was a little bit of vetting. So at the very least, I felt like this will be interesting, or at least fun or good, right? If not, better. But at the very least, it should be this. But don't go out there with a blank slate of crossing your fingers and, having one hand on your sword, protecting yourself, like a lot of people do. Like I said, I think today's entertainment, the clickbait train wreck videos we love watching about relationships online and offline, we love telling stories about the disasters, and the reality TV is the only thing. You look at it on primetime TV, the reality TV are the only shows about relationships. However exaggerated they are, that's what people consume, that's what they love, that's what they tune in for, and that's what they're conditioned by. And so if you go with a normal person, they're going to be very boring by comparison to the entertainment you're watching. So I don't know. It's almost like you've got to make a choice to date in a very mundane, or well, maybe not mundane, but in a very sensible pedestrian manner, because that's where you can actually build foundations. And if something real happens with that kind of posture, it has legs. But if you go there, all rose-colored glasses, reality TV, defensive, playing games, trying to be macho as a guy, or trying to be a boss chick as a girl. It's to me, it's like you're a 5-year-old in a superhero costume, and you're turning up trying to either impress someone or trying to have that reality TV show episode. And I just don't. Do you think that people realize that they're wasting time going out on dates like this? I don't know if they do.
I don't know if they do either, human. I think I really I can't I have no way of putting myself in the place of young men and women in today's dating environment. So I really it's hard to know. The
Mm.
only thing, the only thing that you can talk about is the things that you can see, the things that make their way out into the public discussion, into the public consciousness. So uh, but I agree. I think in today's world, where when we were young, you could be a lot more casual about the dating experience because there was that presumption of desirability between the two individuals. There was a from the start there was that assumption that you wanted to be with one another. I think in today's dating environment, you actually have to be very deliberate, it's sad that a part of that casual enjoyment gets lost in the equation. But I think that's the reality. You can't assume in today's environment. You have to be very deliberate.
That's a great word. And I think if some people conflate that with being too serious, you're being too serious. You'll you want to keep it lighthearted and hormonal, so it'll lead to the bedroom. So you can disarm each other physically, but you don't need to disarm each other emotionally or character wise. Where I would argue, no, that's what you need to do first, and then disarming each other physically will be much easier. And then if you do, there'll be much more trust involved in that as well, and you can be yourself more, and you can be more relaxed. So as far as I can see, this being more deliberate and will help you disarm each other. Like if you're more deliberate and honest, and you don't play the games, and you don't go there impressing people and playing all those kind of gaslighting reality TV based games that people seem to date with these days, then in my experience, it has disarmed the person really quickly. And I could tell by their reaction, they're relieved. They almost kind of think, well, you're refreshing, human, because you seem normal. Like they actually have a smile on their face and they like it. They're not impressed by me. They're relieved, which to me is better than being impressed by someone, because you're you're relieved, and you're connecting with someone because you're just a normal person that hasn't got any pretense in front of them.
Yeah, I agree, and if I think you go back to the fundamentals, I just wanted to say that you sound very old fashioned, human.
No, you know what it is, Boffin? It's kind of like what works, what doesn't. It's not so much do what
I,
your grandparents did, but
I
do
know,
what is sensible. Be direct, and talk honestly. Don't embellish who you are. Don't paint a picture of who you want to be. Tell them who you are. Say you want to be a better person, right? On a date, tell them who you are, where you are now, and optimistically tell them you want to do this, or you want to start a bit, or whatever you want to do. You're fixing a car. Give them who you are honestly, and how you want to improve, or what you want to do in your life. But I think there's so many people, they paint a picture of this fantasy they want to be in the future that probably will never happen, or they give a picture of themselves like they're trying to get the job, like their resume is perfect, but it's not actually who they are. So it's not so much old fashioned as in just be honest and direct. Because our grandparents probably were less honest and direct. They were operating under structural religion, and society
right?
kind of had a lot of structure. So now you've got the opportunity. You don't have any of those expectations or anything. You can just be completely yourself. But I think most people are too lazy. They're not interested intellectually. They don't want to speak or communicate who they are. And maybe, frankly, some of them I don't think have much depth at all, which is why they go back to, oh, all men and women are the same, because you've got nothing to say, nothing to communicate, nothing to illustrate,
Right, right.
even artistically, who I am, how I speak, what I want, what my visions are, like what's happened to me, how I see life. Like, no one can paint the picture. And so all you got is like, well, the only picture I get is your naked body. That's it. That's very basic, but it's really, what's the difference between one naked body you have fun with compared to another one? Like, physically they look
And
different, and each one it'll be a new experience because it is a new person. But it's like driving different cars. Yeah, it's a new experience of a new car, but they're all cars, man.
well, and that it's that point is obvious to you that one naked body is, you can replace that naked body with another naked body with another naked body. The Tinder experience. The interesting thing though is I think, this is how simplistic a thinker I am, but I think if you always go back to the foundational things and focus on those, you'll be much further along in solving whatever problem you're trying to solve. And I
Mm.
think, what is it that the individual is really looking for in a relationship? Take the sex out of the equation. What is it that most people are looking for in a relationship with the opposite sex? I think for me, the most the most elemental answer is they want intimacy. If I had to pick one word, I'd say they're looking for intimacy. They're looking, to use the more popular term, they're looking for their soulmate.
Yeah,
And
but a lot of those words are very kind of ethereal, and like
I
very
know,
kind of Oprah-esque.
that's why I prefer intimacy to soulmate. But I think what they're really looking for is that person that they can connect with at a really deep emotional level.
Sure, but when you ask people, like they say, I want to connect with them, I want them to see the real me. And then you ask them quickly, well, what do you want them to see? What do you talk about? What do you want to communicate? They
E-
can't answer it. It's sort of like,
exactly.
well, like what do you want them to kind of, they're looking in an empty box and expecting to find something, and there's nothing there. But you really wish there was. You want them to see something beyond what you even see. Because I think if you are determined to really work this stuff out, to to get something real, you have to be real. You can't just expect people to see gold when you're not gold. Like, make yourself into gold. Be interesting. Have a hobby. Have something to talk about. Be interested in an aspect of life. It doesn't have to be something that'll impress everyone else, but be interested in something in your own life. Then you'll be able to communicate it. Be interested enough to communicate it. But if you don't care to voice lexically the things that matter to you, if you don't have a rich inner world, don't expect someone to see a rich inner world and
E
clap their hands.
exactly. Someone can't figure it out for you, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of people go into relationships expecting the other person to figure that out,
Well,
and
if
and
you
w
care enough about yourself and what you want and what you want to express, I get sick of these kind of these, toothless mothers with kids who are getting drunk, and they say, "Oh, the children, or my kids, and the government needs to help with it." Well, if you don't care about your kid, why should I? It's the same individually on a date. If you don't care about yourself, if you want people to see something that's not there, and you don't even know what it is, if you ask, like, okay, what do you want people to see? Oh, I just want them to see the real me. Well, what is that? They can't answer you. The more you dig, there's nothing there except poetic words that mean jack shit. Yeah, like there's no practical things that they can tell you, no things that they're interested in, no things that inspire them, no things that they're working towards. Like, if you can't paint me a picture that's on this canvas that you want me to see. You want me to see a work of art, but it's just white. And then you're pointing at other guys or girls and saying, why can't you see this beautiful painting? There's nothing there. There's nothing there.
Yeah,
Paint something.
yep, I agree. You have to know yourself first, and that's the effort I think that most people either won't, invest the time in. But you really do have to understand yourself first. You have to
Mm.
be introspective. You have to be self-reflective. You have to be honest with yourself. How many people are really self-critical enough human to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm really kind of weak there. I don't do that well. I don't enjoy that." Whatever it is, whatever aspect of their personality it is. How many people are honest enough to admit that to themselves? But
Well,
I
how
think
many
that's
things in your own life do you continue to improve on and get better at and try and master?
yeah,
And I would say
yeah.
also, if you're the kind of person that always tinkers with things and tries to master aspects of their life that they're interested in, you'll start to become good at it. And you might need to learn how to verbally express that, to have a dialogue with it, or to express it to people, or to engage. Like, if you want to play football, you don't just do the physical act. You've got to start to learn the lingo and talk with your players and stuff like that. You start to learn to verbally express in tandem with the physical thing that you're into. The same with dating. You got the physical aspect of it, but if you don't give a shit about communicating with the other person,
Yep.
it's like sport. How well am I supposed to play basketball if I don't know the lingo, I don't know the shorthand, I don't know the strategy, the rules, we're not on the same page with the language we speak, but we're all mute and we're all playing on our own, and we can't play as a team, we never win anything. In the same way, if you go on a date, you're playing that kind of mini sport, if the analogy's there, but you don't want to speak, you're not interested, you can't paint any picture, you don't know what the rules are, and you just show up wanting to win a gold medal and then complain to the world that you didn't win a prize again.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Relationships are a team sport, not a solo sport. When you're in a relationship, it's more like a game of baseball or soccer. You're not golfing.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have to go into it with the mindset that it is a team sport. You have to understand your strengths and weaknesses. You have to explore the other person to understand their strengths and weaknesses. You have to make that evaluation of, what each of you are bringing to the relationship and how well it's going to
Mm.
to interact and contribute.
And go there curious. I would say
Yeah.
one word:
Yeah.
go there curious,
Yep.
and pay attention whether your curiosity is being answered.
Yep.
So whether, we talked about pushback, but go there curious, because if you go curious, you'll be optimistic going on the date. You're not going to be defensive. You're not going to be trying to put on an act. You're going to have questions. You're going to be inquisitive. As a guy, girls love questions asked of them about themselves. So that kind of curiosity is a really great jumping off point. But then also notice how your curiosity is coming back to you, or if it is at all, and just kind of pay attention to that. This whole dishonest way that people present uh, a situation, cast themselves in the best light, and then scratch their heads why their relationships don't work. I just don't know how long people can stomach doing it over and over again. I suppose it's like an alcoholic. You can be an alcoholic until you decide to go to AA and be real about things, but I don't know.
Yeah, relationships are not a spectator sport. You have to be an active participant. And like you were talking earlier, you actually it takes a lot of if I think if you want a good relationship, something that's going to work for you in the long term, you have to put in the effort. You have to think about this stuff. And then you have to be willing to interact with the other person to tease out the things that are important to you and vice versa.
Mm, yeah,
I I,
and
I don't
it's like look at your friends, right? The ones you can really trust. They're the kind of guys that if they're late, they'll say, "Oh, sorry, my bad, I was late," or "I screwed up here," or you ask them questions. They never. It's never like with friends that you trust. It can be their fault sometimes, and they'll put their hand up. They're never perfect, right? And you'll learn to trust that they're a real person who can be honest and responsible. But some of these stories you hear from men, but especially women, where they paint themselves as angels, and there's just a sea of dumb guys who are too blind to see how perfect they are. And like this girl, she's painting a picture as though, look, she's so patient with this moron as well, and still these guys can't get it right. It's like, really? That's your mode?
Yeah, I think the moral of the story is be very cautious of the content you consume on the internet because you have no idea. You made the point earlier that this story could have been made up whole cloth and posted on the internet. You have no idea of how real any of it is. There was actually a story in the paper this morning that I was reading. There was a TikTok doctor, and she got busted because she had a TikTok account where she was passing out medical advice to her fans, and it turns out she wasn't a doctor at all. And she certainly presented that way. She represented herself that way, and it turns out she was a complete fraud. She had charges level against her, legal charges. So I think the moral of the story is if you're looking for advice on the internet, be very cautious. I mean,
Yeah.
don't accept what you hear and read on the internet any more than you should believe what you hear from a person on a first date. It takes time. It, it,
Yeah.
it, it it takes time and a very critical, curious nature to actually establish if what you're hearing is true.
Boffin, she identifies as a doctor, okay?
And sadly, human, that seems to be a lot of times all that counts in today's world.
Mm. Well, I guess I should wrap it up. It's getting late here. This was a first test stream. It didn't start off well, technical difficulties. That was my fault. because I have my streaming software calibrated to my regular streams on Sunday. So, but this was nice. I'll get this aligned. But it was okay. I hope people got something out of this. Thanks for showing up, Boffin.
You
It
bet.
was a nice conversation. And yeah, leave your comments down below and like, subscribe. I wanna do more group chats on this channel. Let me know your thoughts. Like any reflections you had on this Reddit story that I read out and Boffin and I discussed, and also this aspect where people paint themselves as angels and their exes as villains, and they just keep coming across completely terrible people that they stay in committed relationships with, and it doesn't make sense. And most of the time, it doesn't make sense because it's not true, because they're not telling you the complete picture. And also, one thing that I say often, and it sounds trite because it sounds cliche, and she mentioned it at the start, that they, the two people are very different in a relationship, and they accept it. Oh, we're completely different, and we're very incompatible. But it wasn't a problem right at the beginning. Well, of course it isn't. It was only a problem when you got to know each other, wasn't it? Which seems really obvious. Of course, when you get to know each other, then the real person, you can see if you match, you fit together, whether you can relate and whether you're compatible. At the start, everyone can get along. You're still finding out if the person fits your expectations. So, yeah, this gaslighting and impressing and all that. And a few people will say because we're older, Boffin, that while when you're older, of course, you realize these things. But yeah, I think there's less and less mentorship. I think guys who have learnt from experience, and especially women don't relay a lot of these experiences nearly as much as men do. I haven't met very many women who will tell you of their screw ups and things that they did wrong, far less than men tend to do. Would you
Yeah.
agree there, Boffin?
Absolutely. To me, that is one of the things that's lacking in the online discussions about these topics, human. I really wish there were more women who would be honest and frank enough to jump into these forums and have honest discussions about where they screwed up, where, looking back over their life, the places where they made big mistakes. And it's not only important for, in particular, young men to hear it, but I think especially young women. I think we collectively as a society, we're certainly, there's a dialogue going on right now about how society is failing young men, and how some of this is becoming obvious. But I think equally, if not more so, society has really failed young women.
Oh yeah, because now they can't be passive in their responsibility with relationships. Before they could be passive and find themselves married and taken care of, and men and women had the guardrails of society and the church and all of that stuff. But now, if women aren't responsible for their actions and what they learned, and structurally responsible for how they conduct themselves, like they need to steer the ship of relationships and what they choose. They no longer have the structure of society or church, or
Right.
like
Right.
you can actually have the freedom of designing your life and designing the relationship you want. But that means you have to be completely honest. If you go into relationships and dating as a dishonest actor, gaslighting, faking your way through, saying yes means no when it doesn't, playing games and treating it like reality TV, then you're just wasting your time and ruining your dating life and giving yourself a bad taste in your mouth
Right.
about dating, when it's really not dating. It's the way you conduct yourself in it, and how fake you're acting, and how you're not saying the right things, not to impress the person, but you're not saying the honest things in terms of who you are. So too many years will go by, and I think the fear that'll come when you're 50 and you've just kind of spent decades lying and evading and gaslighting and evading and lying and reality TV and all that, how it will just shut your hard drive down, to be completely honest, at the age of 50. You need to start being sort of boring and normal, for want of a better word. I think
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's one thing. I don't know how many young women actually listen to content like this. I think a lot of them would be well served if they did. But I think the problem with men of any age trying to offer relationship advice to women is that you're a part of the patriarchy. There's that automatic inclination not to pay attention because, well, you're the enemy in today's, environment.
I think for women also, because they have to be responsible today, because they have to, they're out in the world much, much more. They're responsible for their own lives, which means they're responsible for being a very active and responsible half of a relationship, whereas before they could get away with not being it.
Yeah,
The thing is,
yeah,
women have to have very practical conversations about relationships these days. They cannot have the Oprah universe
exactly.
feelings, energy, crystals, astrology bullshit conversations about meaning, just to kind of feel good. They have to have practical discussions and structural
Exactly.
ones
Yep.
about how to conduct themselves when they say yes or no, all of these sort of things, because now you can't hide behind passivity. Your
Yep.
passivity, if you go via Oprah style advice of relationships, you are going to be old and alone. And guys who hide behind the macho bullshit mask will also end up being old and alone. Both men and women now, because there's no guardrails with society or church or any kind of structure, everyone has to be very practical in their discussion, very, very ethical.
Agreed.
Yeah. Again, if you have to make the choice to do it. You can evade with all these complex theories that sound a lot smarter than me telling you you need to be compatible. Because when we talk about the very basics, very intelligent people who read a lot and know a lot about the biology and the statistics and the psychology and the yada yada, it seems like their knowledge and detail is much, much more intricate and refined. And so what we're talking about is the very basics. It's kind of like
Right.
the Maslow's base level, whereas they're talking in the mid level somewhere in the pyramid. And so they kind of think, well, what you guys are talking about, compatibility and communication and on, yeah, that's just takes it as a given. It's like, no, you don't. No, it's not. None of you do it, because then you wouldn't need all your intricate theories about biology and statistics and divorce laws. None of that would intrude if you get the base right. But you're trying to build a castle, not with foundations, but you're trying to build it further down the line. You're jumping the shark.
Right. And I really hope that as this dialogue, all of these discussions that are taking place on the internet now, I think they're much more realistic, or there's a much better opportunity to have realistic discussions in these types of forums than watching a television talk show that we were limited to in the past, the Oprah style, advice machines on relationships. But I really think that the value is going to come at the point where both sexes start communicating honestly with one another in these forums.
Yeah.
And it has to be focused on the fundamentals, the basics of relationships, laying those foundations. I
Well,
think
these podcasts, like the Fresh and Fits, like where they feel like they're getting somewhere because they've collectively got like a bunch of people in a studio and they're talking with professional equipment, but they're just bitching at each other and they're going
right.
around in a circular fashion. They're talking politically, but they're not talking personally and honestly.
Yeah.
They're not
Yep.
talking about right and wrong and morals and ethics and fairness and things like that. and you really need to make the conversation ethical, otherwise it's not going anywhere. You can feel like you're getting somewhere because you're talking about this stuff, but how are you talking about it? Are you talking about it politically, or are you talking about it personally,
Right.
where you're
Right.
going to be humble and admit where you screwed up, or how you don't want to be anymore, or this was wrong but now this is right? We can't just keep saying, talking in the same ways. You know what it's like? It's For me, it's like I was tired of carrying around a big suitcase, and it's like you want to put handles on it. You want to be able to hold this big thing a lot easier, and you start putting handles on it by having these more realistic, practical discussions. And unless you have practical discussions about it, real life, everyday routines, get up, go to bed, fairness, all of that sort of very base level stuff, you will never get anywhere going for sophisticated PhD level, peer reviewed research stuff about these topics. They don't matter. This sort of stuff is good for post mortem, but it's no good for uh, having a good foundation by which to operate. Like, you want to be dating with Maslow's base level foundations of this stuff. You don't want to be aiming for the top of the pyramid every time you're dating, and the top of your pyramid is an Oprah pyramid that doesn't make sense. It's all about feelings. You want to sort of have this practical base by which you go on every date. Just wanting to communicate, not wanting to sort of have any window dressing or mask on, all these kind of very practical base level things by which you conduct yourself. Then you got a chance, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I, I, I know this sounds silly, but I kind of imagine a lot of young guys going on dates, and they're carrying around all of these studies and statistics in their head, as they're interacting with this woman that they're interested in. And to me, that is indicative of the competition and conflict, flavor that dating and relationships have taken on in today's world. The fresh and fits are a good example of conflict and competition, but not problem solving, not relationship building. And when you get stuck in that loop of, this hostile back and forth of, oh, I got one up on her, she got one up on me, so I have to get another one up on her. It doesn't lead anywhere good. And yet that seems to be the prevalent dynamic in today's world.
Well, if you're never looking for real practical solutions, you can just have fun continually
Yeah.
test driving cars, can't
Yeah.
you? Uh,
Exactly.
you
Exactly.
can always, and the smarter you are as well, the cleverer you are, and the more information you consume on the internet, there's a whole bevy of very intelligent and yet sensible reasons why you don't need to pick yet. And if your excuses are always leading you away from picking, then even more reason why you shouldn't pick.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, I could see myself stuck in an intellect, and I was for a time. Not to say that I was wrong, but it can be very comfortable to be in a very intelligent feedback loop that keeps you safely not choosing, and not potentially choosing the wrong thing, never having to choose, therefore never having to be wrong and never having to fail. But you're never grabbing anything. You're never living with anything. You're never making you're just test driving that car, but you're never taking a car home. You're never bonding with that car. You're just
Test
temporarily,
driving.
getting in the
Yeah.
car and handing it back, and then going home alone, and then next day going, magically thinking that one day you're just going to be allowed to drive the car home, and you never will, because you never want to, because you want to
Yeah,
drive a different one.
I think that would be a great topic for one of these discussions. The whole idea of making a choice, eventually getting to the point of closure, making the choice, making the commitment. What does that mean? The importance of it. I think that'd be a great topic for a discussion.
Yeah. Because if you can talk all day about wanting to achieve something, like say for instance me, like I want to create a certain video. Like before that, you want to come down to, okay, if that's really enticing to me, or is it just a lot of hopeful words that's great for a conversation with people? I love just the carrot of hope. Or do I actually want to put my hands on something and create something? Then you start researching cameras and buying things and like taking them out and learning how to use them. There's this real intent to want to get somewhere with the thing. And I
Right.
think there's a same kind of leaning with dating. There's a difference between having fun in a very carefree way where you're always just kind of almost a tourist,
Yeah.
or are you a person that kind of really wants to jump in there and make something and do something and tinker with it and put your hands on it? I think most people are spectators, but they're talking like they're participants, and I really don't think they are, because I see a difference between when I was fooling myself into thinking I was really participating in dating and love, and I wasn't. I was talking a lot about it, but I was really just an observer that had fun, but I wasn't actually participating in any meaningful way. I wasn't choosing anything. I wasn't spending time with it. I wasn't, warts and all. Uh, it's kind of like when you live somewhere compared to when you just stay in a million hotel rooms. It's a very, very different experience.
Yeah, it's the transition from the design stage to the execution stage. If you want a house, you have to spend some time in the design stage, but eventually you have to come to the point where you transition into the construction phase. And I think, again, in today's world, there's a large segment of the population who kind of gets stuck in the design phase, the research development phase. But at some
Hmm.
point, you have to put something into production. And I think a lot of people struggle with that in today's world because we focus on all of the pitfalls of actually building the house. Well, the roof, might leak, and the walls might get termites, and there might be problems with the plumbing. Well, yeah, that's all a part of life and reality. But
Mm,
you can't perpetually stay in the design stage. At some point you have to execute. You have to commit.
yeah. But yeah, look, generations now, like everything's so virtual that if you don't know anything else, and also real life is in a lot of ways less exciting than the virtual potential, the high, you know what I mean? How do
Yeah,
you how
yeah,
do you sell that to someone who's used to the excitement and the vibrancy of digital experience,
yeah.
and then you kind of present to them a very black and white kind of boring version of a good relationship? It just seems boring by comparison. It's just perception. Like for you and me, it's not, but to them, perception. It's kind of like, yeah, your comfortable working relationship is putting me to sleep, human, whereas my exciting one keeps me awake. Like this roller coaster. I want a fun roller coaster all the time. So
I want a 1-minute TikTok video all the time.
I want a 1 minute TikTok video that freezes time and lasts my entire life, and the feeling never subsides. That 15, I'm like a goldfish where that 15 seconds just kind of keeps repeating, and I've forgotten I've watched it. But anyway, yeah, we should, that topic, what you mentioned before, what was it again?
Making a decision,
Yeah,
closure.
more about making a decision. I think that'd be a one with a lot of meat on the bone. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
what, why are people really wanting to make a decision? How they conduct themselves? Is it a nice carrot in a conversation where people feel good and stroke their own egos by telling each other their plan? It's like, people who want to get fit. It's like you never have to, you feel good telling people and convincing yourself that you're going to start on Monday. You're starting your diet on Monday. It's like a New Year's resolution. It feels great, but actually starting it with no audience and like you have to kind of pull the trigger on the thing, it's not as sexy as the anticipation and broadcasting it to everyone. And I think the way people Tinder their relationships and recycle them, there's a fun broadcasting of it perpetually, nonstop, never choosing, and it's kind of exciting, always being on the edge
Yeah.
of
Yep.
choosing and talking and first dates and keeping them going. And a choice just feels almost like the end. It's like, oh, okay, now I chose someone. The party's over.
Yeah.
So it's a very different kind of mindset that you really got to want and lean into, because the perpetual dating, a real relationship is, I can see how it can seem like death to people, like the opposite of what the fun of dating is. When you choose someone, it's like, okay, now my life's over. I've chosen someone. The excitement's gone. It's going to get boring. But you've really got to condition yourself and make a intentional choice
Yeah.
to
Yep.
value one thing and be sick of the roller coaster. No matter how colorful the roller coaster is, you've got to choose to say enough of it. I don't care anymore. Enough of the strippers, enough of the porn, enough of whatever. Like I want this now. It's kind of like people who retire to the country. Enough of the city. I want the country.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good analogy. There's all kinds of interesting distractions in the city, but if you want to settle into a comfortable, contented lifestyle, a lot of times the country is more conducive to that.
Mm. Yeah, I think I've made a video and mentioned it once or twice. When do you get sick of perpetually being on holiday, and at what point do you just want to set up roots and you want to feel like you're at home? When do you start dating with the intent of finding where your home is, or are you just enjoying the holiday
Right.
experience with
Right.
people? Is that your lifestyle? Be very, very honest. And the choice you make in one kind of lifestyle compared to, you know, living somewhere and calling a place home for the long term, for the rest of your life, they're two very, very different ways of dating, ways of looking for a partner.
Yeah, and in fairness, there are people who would be completely contented with traveling the world at a different vacation spot year after year for the rest of their lives, but I think it's a very small segment of the population. But they also tend to be the people that get a lot of attention. But I think most people really are inclined to want to settle into that home environment that you mentioned.
Mm,
But the we tend to pay attention to the people who are on vacation all the time because they're the most entertaining, they're the most interesting. But most people aren't suited for that lifestyle.
mm. You've got to intentionally want the homebody lifestyle. You've got to be sick of perpetually going on different holidays.
Right.
And you've also got to be sick of having the friends with benefit, the holiday you go back to over and over again. So you've got to really uh, make a concerted effort to want to date in a certain way. But that's
Agreed.
like anything in life, whether it's your health or the way you think, or getting out of a certain living arrangement that's been frustrating you for years. You've got to come to a point where enough is enough, and
Yep.
you start
Yep.
taking practical steps to change things. But anyway, let's have that conversation another time. Thanks for making the time, Boffin. I hope this was you guys enjoyed this. Let me know in the comment section if you want me to do more midweek streams at this time, because I thought I usually do them in the morning on Sunday, and I'll do one in the evening on the other opposite end of the clock for people on the other side of the planet somewhere. So let me know if you enjoyed these, and I'll direct more people from my main channel to here if we're having conversations or there's an interesting topic that would be better served by discussing with a number of people rather than just myself on my main channel. So anyway, any last words, Boffin, before we go?
I think we pretty much covered it all. Uh, to back to the story about the bowl. I think it's indicative of creative framing of a story, and a lot of times the truth leaks through as hard as you try to conceal it. And to the point that you made earlier about relationships, you can mask certain aspects of who you are for a time, but eventually they'll come out in the relationship, and that's when things get difficult.
Mm.
Be honest, be upfront, be yourself.
Yep. Yep. I agree. All right. Like, subscribe, leave your comments below. What did you think of the stream? And leave your thoughts related to anything we touched on or discussed. The Reddit post I read, your thoughts on that, what you read between the lines, and your experience with people that also embellish themselves, or how their relationships were, or how bad their exes were and they were completely perfect and things like that. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks, Boffin, and we'll do it again.
Sounds good.
So, all right. See you guys. Bye.